Fundamentally, in the world, there are institutions we just cannot change. You look at something like Patreon, the amount of hegemony that they have over the market in terms of spending money on things, on independent artists. Then you look at something like YouTube. It's completely homogenized, where every single company that tries to combat their iron grip on the system of uploading videos always fails. VidMe failed immediately. They couldn't get advertised on because they weren't YouTube. And so because all of these alternatives always fail, because it's easy to go to YouTube, everyone knows YouTube and therefore they keep going there and it keeps getting bigger, it becomes a problem for changing it. If there's no competition, then there's no need to innovate. There's no need to change. And so I believe we're seeing this with something like Patreon, where they have recently banned certain levels of freedom of speech, which, I mean, they're a private company, they're allowed to do that. But because the market is so homogenized that they're the only one that you can really go to and expect people to pay you, because again, people know them, and so it's easy for them to just go there. If you're on some alternative website, it's likely you're going to get very, very little money for doing the type of content that they've banned. And so it becomes an issue. People can no longer get paid. They're basically making it to where on the market you cannot say these things anymore because no one will pay for them. They're not going around. They have such a large influence on that I don't necessarily think it's just, freedom of speech, whatever, they're a private company, who cares? Yeah, I agree, freedom of speech is about the government, but I do believe that because they have such a tight grip and such a tight influence on the market, by them making these rules, it is, in effect, eliminating the existence of this content, at least in terms of eliminating the artists who make them getting paid, and because they're not getting paid, they're going to make less of it. To an extent, it is censoring things from existing. It's censoring things from being said. You see this much of the time in the news media, where there are opinions, news opinions that could be said on television that people have. You know, you can use your freedom of speech to say them, but they're never going to be financed because those opinions are not what the people who financing them would want you to say. This is why we have, like, the main center-liberal ones. We have MSNBC, then we have the regular Republican right-wing network, Fox. Those are speaking heads of their own political parties. Very rarely do we see any dissent from those things, if at all. And so they continue to push the hegemonic powers of the two parties. There's never going to be a news network that's being funded by rich people to make a independent news network that talks about maybe more radical or outside of the box politics that aren't just the same two hegemonic parties. In a sense, those ideas are being censored just because they're not going out to the masses. You can't go out and see, like, an alt-right news source, because of course everyone is going against that. Everyone is using their money to get that away, and so people can't be educated on it. People can't see those perspectives, and in a sense they are being censored. It can't grow just because there's no money behind it. And so with this hegemonic grip on things, I do believe Patreon is doing a similar thing. And I think by critiquing these things, there is very little we can do, just because there's no competition. You can't do anything about it. You as an individual leaving to go somewhere else is not going to change anything, just because they have all this other money that's being given to them. There's never going to be a massive uproar of people leaving because it would be bad for business. The audience who's giving you money would not want to move to another website. They don't care. They just go to the one that's easy for them. Consumers want the easiest way to give you money possible. And so because of that, they're not going to go to another site, and thus, creators are not going to leave en masse. So if one leaves, they're not going to make a statement on the company. The company is going to continue doing what they're doing. Again, hegemonic power. And so, by critiquing them, because there's no competition, there's very little change that can actually be inflicted, if any. So, the argument that would be made against criticism is just why? Why would you do this if it's not going to make any change? Critiques should only be made in the event that it's making a change or that you're trying to make a change, but it seems to be that there's no road where any change could be made that you could go down. That's basically the argument that I see a lot of people making about this. And I disagree. I do believe that there can be no change made out of that criticism, but I don't think change is necessarily the only avenue criticism can go down. I don't think it's the only thing criticism is useful for. I think by listening to our favorite content creators, by listening to our favorite personalities rail against YouTube, expose all of the things YouTube is doing wrong, we can then enjoy ourselves. It's fun to listen to people point out the flaws in things. It's fun to cathartically listen to implement shit on YouTube, even though he's not going to have an effect on it. It's just the editing and personality of what he says has emotional resonance to it, because maybe you've been thinking about these things, or I don't know, maybe you're not, and it just puts a new idea in your head. But the point is that to listen to someone passionately rail against someone or something is fun. It's fun to do that, even if it doesn't make any change. They're just a personality you like, and you're just listening to them be passionate. I do think on the level of ideas as well, it does serve value. It serves value to constantly be questioning things. Never stop thinking about the way systems work. Never stop thinking about why things do the things that they do, because it's a brain exercise. It's good for your brain to never stop questioning how things are. Even if that questioning doesn't change anything, it doesn't necessarily need to. It can change you. You can become a more well-rounded and smart person from thinking about how things work. And so, to make a statement about it, to write out your thoughts, would be to question how things work. You're putting your thoughts together and learning how to do so better. And I think there's legitimate value to that. Even if it doesn't change anything necessarily, you're still becoming a more well-rounded and smart human being from having looked at how these things work and then been able to explain what it is they do wrong.